Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about Planned Parenthood and their entrance into the 2024 presidential election, pledging $40 million on abortion rights and Democratic candidates across the country as they head into a very contentious election season. Planned Parenthood has officially announced that for the first time in this cycle, they are going to be spending tens of millions of dollars here to boost President Biden and congressional Democrats up across the United States. In terms of states they are targeting, right now they are focused on 8 key states: Montana, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New York, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. 5 out of those 10 states are very competitive on the presidential level. If you also include New Hampshire, that makes it 6 out of the 8 here, not 10. Overall, a very substantial amount of states here are already going to be competitive and having tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, funneled into them from top campaigns like President Trump's and President Biden's for this November election. And Planned Parenthood has done things like this before. Back in 2020, they put $40 million in that presidential race, and we saw how that turned out for Democrats winning a trifecta for the first time in over a decade. And then in 2022, Planned Parenthood spent a record-breaking $50 million in the midterm elections for that 2022 cycle. And again, when you take a look at the areas in which they invested in, Democrats did quite well. Now, the 2024 cycle has been very much understood to be a very important one for outside groups. Traditionally speaking, presidential elections are far often won by outside groups funneling money into either side of the aisle in order for them to win. It's always helpful to have an extra $50 to $100 million on your side of the campaign, especially when in America, politics is driven by the finances that back it. You find that the candidates who spend the most money in Congress 90% of the time on average, in the past decade, 90% of the time, whether you're in the Senate or the House, combined average here, 90% of the time you win. If you out fundraise and you outspend your candidate, you are winning. And that's because a lot of what politics is, a lot of what it is advertisements, it's spending, it's getting people on the ground, because money drives the world and money drives American politics. And so now you're finding that President Biden and President Trump are really focusing on this election from a financial perspective. After the guilty verdict, Donald Trump went out there and fundraised heavily. 2 back-to-back months of beating President Biden in fundraising numbers, now completely evening out the playing field when it comes down to a fundraising advantage. Just 2 months ago, Joe Biden had $150 million more dollars than Donald Trump did. That matters. And the narrowing up of it is not the best news for Democrats. But when you have entrances of groups that traditionally might be spending $40 million on a race, spending that again, it's always helpful. You find that Planned Parenthood may not have made as major of an entrance into this race, despite doing so in 2020 and 2022, if the race looked a little bit better for President Biden. When Donald Trump announces that he has fundraised $200 million, more so in the combined 2 months now, that's a wake-up sign for national Democrats. It's a wake-up sign for people at the DNC, people in the Biden campaign, people on the major donor list here, people in different organizations that fundamentally support the Democratic Party like Planned Parenthood. Those groups out there sort of raise the alarm bell and say, wait a second, our strategy here to win was to bury Trump in cash. They did this back in 2020. Biden out-fundraised Donald Trump. And as you know it, and as is the case standard with American politics, the candidate who raises more, the candidate who spends more, typically ends up winning. Exact case in 2020, in 2022, and potentially again in 2024. Now, with more money on the side of the Democratic Party end, it means that there could be a more expansive use of campaign cash in some of these states. And it also is no secret as to why they are targeting some states you might be surprised to see on a map like this one, like New York and Montana. Because based on where we have our map here of abortion referendums on the ballot this coming November, Planned Parenthood is looking to boost these abortion referendums. Why is that good news for Democrats? In fact, I'd even argue that it's better news for Democrats because it means that this is going to be pushing out more advertisement around the abortion referendum, more advocacy for the pro-choice movement, because that is a winning movement. What the 2022 midterms proved to us, especially in those governor elections, I want to take a look at those in specific because it showed the full force of what abortion means for voters in these states. In states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, where the polls said Republicans would win or it would be a very narrow race. In states like Kansas, where Trump won by 16, but Democrats won the abortion referendum there. Democrats won the governorship there. Arizona, where Democrats were down 4 points, ended up winning in that state. Why? Democrats did something right on the issue of abortion, and that was be aligned with 67% of this nation. And in swing states, very much the same number. Battleground state voters, on average, are pro-choice. The average American is pro-choice. And when voters have to make a decision at the ballot box, and there are tens of millions of dollars being funneled on both sides, pro-life and pro-choice, to beat a referendum, to fail it, to win it, whatever it might be, it translates its way all the way up to national politics, to statewide politics, to something more than just an abortion referendum. A perfect case study would be the Michigan governor's race, where Gretchen Whitmer won by 10 points against Tudor Dixon in this state. Coinciding with this Michigan race was the Amendment number 3, Proposition 3, that was specifically on the issue of abortion. Let's see if we can find it here, because it was a really, really fascinating election. Because it allowed us to see how the voters in this state, taking away every other election, believed on issues like abortion. Abortions are something that you find that, again, the majority of this nation believes should be accessible to women, should be a constitutional right. And so when they vote on it, we can find that some very interesting things here. I don't think we'll be able to find it, unfortunately. But the point being, and you can look at it too, the abortion referendum only ended up outrunning Gretchen Whitmer by just a few points. Just a few points. Largely, every county voted the same way. And the reason why that matters is because an abortion referendum translated to a strong victory for Gretchen Whitmer. Because Tudor Dixon, the Republican, had to come out there when questioned at the debate, when questioned by reporters, when questioned by supporters, questioned by everyone. Where do you stand on this proposition? Are you pro-life? Are you pro-choice? How would you vote if given the opportunity to vote on an issue like this, on the legality of abortion in this state? And she says, I would vote against legal abortion. I'm pro-life. And then it becomes real. For 50 years, Democrats have used abortion as an issue to try to win voters over on. And it might have been able to work in some individual instances, but very largely it didn't work. Because 50 years of Roe v. Wade being the law of the land meant that abortion was untouchable regardless of who was elected. Until it wasn't. And it became real for all these battleground state voters. That became a mainstream issue. To many voters here, more important than the economy, more important than immigration, more important than healthcare. And sort of in a way that was intertwined. Point being, though, it was a single issue vote for many voters there. Swing voters that might have been more inclined to vote for the GOP that realized that this election was different, that the 2022 midterms would determine the future of abortion in their states. But now all of these states with abortion referendums on the ballot here, it's going to matter there too. But the problem here for national Democrats is that you can't campaign on Biden in Montana. You can't do that. And Jon Tester certainly needs the help. No matter what, Biden isn't going to win Montana, and there's no type of coattails that will bring Jon Tester over the finish line. But you know what could? An abortion referendum. An abortion referendum that could be backed by potentially $6, $7, $8 million, depending on how the breakdown splits across these 8 states. Montana's small. 4 electoral votes, one of the smallest states in the country. It doesn't cost too much to get into media markets there. It doesn't cost too much to do flyers and mailouts. It doesn't cost too much to get people to the ballot box in a way it might in a state like Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Georgia. When Planned Parenthood targeting does the Democratic Party's job for them. Because again, Democrats can't campaign on Biden, meaning that entire Biden victory fund, untouchable in the state of Montana, can be used elsewhere. Helps offset the cost of the Democratic Party trying to focus on just Jon Tester. If you can drive a voter out to the ballot box to vote for an issue like abortion and vote yes to make it legal or vote no depending on what the provision is trying to do, chances are they'll vote down ballot in 99% of instances. And if they're already voting pro-choice and the Democrats have aligned themselves one way and Republicans have aligned themselves the other, they would be inclined to vote blue. And don't tell me it didn't happen, because it did happen in 2022 and we saw it happen. In states with abortion referendums and states where there were some very outspoken pro-life advocates on the Republican side. It damaged the GOP, and to this day, they haven't figured out how to talk about it. Why? Because their fundamental position of being pro-life is so in opposition with what the rest of the country believes that they can't be right on an issue like this one. It's the same thing as LGBTQ rights. If the Supreme Court was to go ahead and do exactly what, maybe they want, what Clarence Thomas wants, and strike down Obergefell v. Hodges, or strike down any protections for LGBTQ citizens, I can guarantee you that's another issue that Republicans could never win on. Their 2020 and 2016 platform, take a look at it, says that they believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. Okay. When you campaign on something like that, and you campaign on something like that on a national level, you lose. They did lose. 2016, it was different. Obergefell v. Hodges had just been put into law, and no one was worried too much about it being overturned by a Trump Supreme Court, as it was. Then you found, in 2020, it became a similar argument, but again, if Roe v. Wade had yet to be overturned, what's to say that this is next? It was sort of like Roe v. Wade was that barrier of entry that made voters say, the Supreme Court isn't too bad. And then it was. And then it became an issue in 2022 when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And now an issue like that one is being brought back up into litigation, brought back up into conversation. Certain states are starting to now impose bans on administering marriage licenses for people who administer same-sex marriages. I mean, these are things that are now becoming a reality. So voters are worried. And so voters take these initiatives and these ballot referendums that at once were in theory non-binding, that are now very binding, very, very seriously. And Planned Parenthood spending this money does Democrats a very good job. Montana is a Senate thing. New York is a House thing. But every other state is a presidential. I didn't spend too much time talking about New York, but my point here is that in 2022, Democrats did not do well in those House elections. Why? Because they underperformed significantly in the governor's race there. Their top ticket item, which was Kathy Hochul versus Lee Zeldin, who at the time was a sitting U.S. representative. She was then the lieutenant governor who became governor after Andrew Cuomo. We know the rest of the story. She won by 6.4. The Democrat in New York, Biden won here by over 20. She won by 6.4. So with that reversion, compared to 2018, compared to 2020, compared to 2016, Democrats saw massive losses across the state. So now, Planned Parenthood is looking to take the fact that New York has an abortion referendum and making it a prime issue. But Planned Parenthood is playing smart. North Carolina and Georgia don't have abortion referendums on the ballot. And yet they're spending money there too. Why? Well, because these are states with Republican legislatures, and they can take these abortion bans that have been put into effect across the Deep South and use it as an attack on Trump, use it as an attack on the GOP at large, and make it less likely for them to win these battleground states. When margins come down to as narrow as they were in 2020, there is no denying that every single penny spent on both sides mattered to the fullest degree. When Georgia, Wisconsin, and Arizona, had they gone just 1 point the other way, 1 point the other way, Donald Trump would have been reelected. That is how much these elections really come down to the narrowest of margins. It's so fascinating, but it explains a lot. And money also explains a lot too. Biden outspent and out-fundraised Trump in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, New Hampshire, Colorado, New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, and yes, some states he lost, like Florida and North Carolina. But you don't win them all. But you do win most of them. And most of them is enough to certainly put Biden over 270 again in 2024. When you take a look at this map, you find that Planned Parenthood is also playing a lot of defense. New York doesn't really count. Montana wouldn't really count it. That's very clearly there for the abortion referendum and for the Senate race there. But New Hampshire, defense. Wisconsin, defense. Georgia, defense. Arizona, defense. Pennsylvania, defense. I mean, you take a look at this map here and see that Republicans really only won North Carolina and Montana. And North Carolina, it looks like Planned Parenthood is going to play offense here. But a lot of defense. No expansion of the electoral map in the way the Trump team has just announced that they're opening 19 campaign field offices in Virginia, in Minnesota. There are parts of swing states that don't even have Trump field offices, and yet they're saying we're going to go for Minnesota and Virginia. They also said they're going to go for New Jersey. Yeah, good luck there. Overall, the entrance of groups like this, like Planned Parenthood and many others too, totaling up to potentially a $1 billion effort to re-elect President Joe Biden. These outside donors and these outside efforts here are very beneficial for President Biden because they hit at different points and can campaign in ways that maybe the traditional campaign simply cannot. All things that help President Biden win re-election, whether through boosting turnout in an abortion referendum or just overall driving support to your cause in the name of issues like abortion. That's what Planned Parenthood is doing for this November. $40 million is a lot of money. They floated higher numbers like $45 million. We'll wait and see what they actually end up investing in the race. But this is a lot. This could be a true, moneymaker for the Democratic Party and do a lot of positive things for their campaign. Because cash is everything in American politics, and right now Democrats really need it. Because they're now even with Donald Trump, and if that continues through the election, they may be at a deficit. But they won't be if groups like this end up contributing more and more money. They can outspend Donald Trump even if it isn't directly coming from the campaign. It's going to be hard, and it's going to take a lot and all hands on deck. But what Democrats have shown is that in moments of crisis like this one, where now they're even with the Republican nominee for president, they bring in the big guns. Planned Parenthood, massively known name, massive amounts of money being spent on this race, focused on electing Democrats and President Biden. That's good news for the Democratic Party. That's good news for the Biden campaign team. And it goes to show just how far an issue like abortion can matter not only on the electoral level, but also on the financial level in very tremendous ways. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist of my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.